So today up for discussion on our agenda items are 6 board policies for your review and discussion. And I will go over them one by one. I'll just do a brief intro and then I'll have either Crystal Kohlross or Jillian Beck add in where you think is necessary to just provide us with relevant information. The first bylaw up for revision is Board Bylaw 2100. It deals with the amendment to our election schedule. Currently, our current election schedule for areas 1, 3, 5, and 7 are in March of presidential years, and areas 2, 4, and 6 are in June. And what this does is this new board policy will be aligned so that the elections will be in November. And the good part is the fiscal impact. By changing it this way, we save approximately 22%
Of what?
I think in cost.
Okay.
And we don't have to pay to the registrar's office.
Okay,
So
because
this
it's consolidated.
is consolidated, yes. And so there is going to be good cost savings. Okay. Minimal operational impact to the district. And any comments from Jillian or Crystal on this?
Nothing except I think it's worth looking at how, if we move to this cycle, we'll extend the terms of the current board
Yes.
members. We should just pay attention.
That is a very good point. Since we're moving the election, the trustees in area 1, 3, 5, and 7, their terms will be extended for about 6 months. And for the areas 2, 4, and 6, their term will be extended 8 months. So you have to be comfortable with that.
Right.
Do you have any issues with that?
No, because I remember that even in the previous board, this came up. And I do believe that with the California primaries, there was March and then there was June. So it wasn't even just June primaries, it was March primaries and then June primaries. So I do think that this also helps align with the general election. And I believe that many of the board trainings happen in December or January. So for board members who are newly elected, they can attend these trainings in a timely manner than having to wait until either April or July.
You're referring to the state one.
Correct.
Right? All right. That's good to know. So it makes for a better flow
Yes.
for election cycles.
And I also think that it makes for a better flow for our reorganization meetings, so that,
Right.
for example, when you were the board chair, you had to
It was short by 4
4
months.
months. Yeah.
And then the
So-
current president is lengthened by a few months.
Yeah, so it brings some equity along the lines of serving as board officers.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments?
If this passes the board, we will then have to take a look at when you do your annual meetings, because that's scheduled at a different time right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just so it's kind of a package. Once you do this, we'll move right into the next
Right.
one.
Because usually then the annual meetings, if it's November election, it will probably be December.
We have a few years, but if this policy passes at the next board meeting, Crystal, could you put that on your list and have it done this year so that it's just a complete packet?
Correct.
Doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
Hello.
Okay.
We're just talking about the first item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The first
They
item.
change your election till next year.
Just kidding. Just kidding. It's called fast track.
Happens to the best of us.
This is Board Bylaw 2100. It's an amendment to this policy to change the election schedule to November with a 22% cost savings in cost to align to the general November election. And if this passes, then we've asked Crystal to amend our bylaw for the annual organizational meeting to just coincide with the let's take a look at the next one. This next one is an administrative procedure, and this is an amendment to the AP 2110. It deals with vacancies on the board, and it looks like this is a proposed amendment because there are new legal requirements on posting on the district's website in 3 public places of the vacancy. There is no fiscal impact with minimal impact to college operations.
So
And
the,
this
so this changes the posting.
It changes, it adds a posting on the district's
Oh, okay.
website. So if you look at the draft here, the proposed revisions are in bold. And if you look at the bold section, it shows where the vacancy, that's the proposed revision here. And it shows where you're going to post the vacancy. So it's a posting requirement. A copy of the, this is in the government code, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a
It's
new
basically-
revision, or we were just behind?
We were actually,
Oh,
this happens so seldom for us.
yeah.
I very rarely get to it, when I saw the new language and thought we should update it. The board is now giving directions to the administration on how we keep it posted.
So, and it's for vacancies, which we have none.
Correct. So if someone would resign their position and you were going to go to fill it, this would be a vacancy.
Any other questions for Priscilla Bolas?
I think we need an apostrophe after the T.
Let's see, where are you?
And posting a notice on the district's website.
Where are you?
First paragraph.
And post the bold.
Oh, yes, I see that. Okay. Can you go through this one more time and just make sure it's grammatically correct? Alright. Any questions of Crystal or Jillian? Very good. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. This board policy 2310 deals with how we run our meetings, and I think the focus is on teleconferencing. And as you know, the Brown Act was amended a few times, mainly in response to the COVID pandemic, as to how we are going to do teleconferencing. And so this new board policy is in line with these new amendments. And actually, I would like to have Crystal explain one of the significant aspects of these new amendments with respect to teleconferencing and public comments, and how this provision affects public comments with respect to teleconferencing.
I'm actually gonna let Jillian do
I
this.
can take this one.
Okay.
So we worked closely with Mark Reese from Atkinson on this. Essentially, as we moved out of this special circumstances during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a sunsetting of some temporary regulations. So this updates that. There then became a decision that boards could make according to Mark Reese, which was either reverting back to the previous teleconferencing rules, the pre-pandemic teleconferencing rules, which is what our board follows. And that is that the board can host meetings via teleconference as long as you follow the requirements that are listed in the policy, such as a quorum being within the district and things like that. But then for individual board members, they can also do so, but they have to follow those requirements as well, such as posting, the address where you are, allowing for the potential for public comment if there's someone wanted to come to that physical place. The new rules, which is not what our board follows currently, would allow for public commenters to be able to give public comment virtually. And that is, thus far, is not what the board has decided to allow. And so we've reverted back to the old teleconferencing rules, which is permitted by the Brown Act.
We are going back to the old teleconferencing rules, so the traditional rules of teleconferencing are going to be implemented, and the post-COVID rules are not, right?
Correct, so there was temporary COVID rules, which, there's a section called during states of emergencies, that's been updated. And then there was a new, amendment approved, a new bill that was passed that provides new regulations that would allow for people to do public comment virtually, but then it also puts in more regulations and requirements for board members to be able to participate remotely. And so you basically had to choose one or the other, according to our attorney, and he recommended, based on the board's practices, to revert back to the teleconference rules, which effectively wouldn't change what you're already doing now. So if you had at a previous meeting, like this year, for instance, those were the rules that are being basically put into this policy to reflect that,
So we went full circle.
pretty much.
Okay.
So teleconferencing also includes Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Any questions of Julia?
No, I think part of this is, do we want to have the public be able to comment when they're not in a meeting in person, right?
Well, so the
These
current
other
policy
pieces
you're
of it.
reviewing now does not include that. So if that was something that the board wanted to look into, that would potentially be the new rules. And so that would also impact individual board members' participation and requirements that you have to follow. So if you wanted to explore that, that would be different than these procedures. But you can always revisit if you'd like to.
If you wanted to explore that, my recommendation is we table this, and at the next meeting, I would have Mark Breezy write us a comprehensive memo and have him show up at the next meeting to explain it.
I think part of this is about, and I appreciate that, part of this is about how much engagement do we want the public to have. I think during COVID, we had more folks commenting because they were all on Zoom. They had easier access to the board meetings. And, it really just depends on the level of engagement.
How much access do you want? What is the
There's-
level of access and different modalities that we design?
And there are other restrictions on what board members can do as well.
So like,
Under the, and I wouldn't call it a new policy, I would call it an
alternative is probably a better.
alternative option
Mhm.
that they are now providing.
I think I would like Mark Breezy to write us a comprehensive memo and have a pros and cons and options. That's just my thought. I'm open to discussion on that.
The reasoning behind this change is because of the COVID rule sunsetting, essentially.
So essentially, you would have to choose either the alternative, the new alternative policy, or reverting back to the old. Yeah.
And traditional teleconferencing rules are pretty simple,
Okay.
which is what
So do we want to make a recommendation from this committee, or?
One question of curiosity, do we know what our peer institutions have done?
Yeah, and they've all gone back to the original state, pretty much everyone has.
Got it.
So who has?
Oh, I don't know who hasn't.
I mean,
On
I'm
the
sure,
list-
like if Santa Monica didn't, or some of our, Mount Sac didn't, I mean, it's kind of, but if they all did around the region, then I think that we can go back to the pre-COVID.
If we stay at the current one, the post-COVID, is that creates additional burdens for the trustee that is filing the remote.
Well, the current practice is what we've been doing. Crystal, do you want to talk about the?
Well, what we had to do when we went into COVID is we had to adopt the section on meetings during proclaimed states of emergency that you see we've now crossed out, because that's what sunsetted
Okay.
as of January. So we had to include one or the other option in here. And we chose, or the lawyers recommended, that we go back to what we were doing before pre-COVID. And that's all we really did here.
Yeah.
So
So-
let's just, do you wanna just go back with the lawyer's recommendation so that we can,
I'm okay with traditional teleconferencing. It just means that you have to post the agenda on the door of where you're remotely appearing with your
Yeah.
address.
do you have to be in the district?
No.
Okay.
Remember
Just
the
a
public
quorum
can
has
come
to
in?
be in the district.
What's
Excuse me?
that?
Sorry, a
Quorum.
quorum has to be.
Okay.
Remember the public can come into your Hawaii
Yeah.
and anybody can
Right.
come in. You have to put your address, location.
Yeah, so I'm okay with reverting back to, what we did pre-COVID, so that we don't need to have the attorney do all those memos and stuff. You're comfortable, you're the chair, I'll defer to you.
I'm not that, I don't have strong
Yeah.
opinions about which option, as long as it works.
I like what's listening about referring back to the old option, so.
Okay.
It certainly makes it easier for us. Okay.
There's
Alright.
one more thing I'd like to point out, because you did such a nice job under number 5 of laying out what are not brown out meetings.
Was
Where,
What are not brown
Mhm.
applications?
Yeah.
read it just a very small paragraph, and he actually laid it all out. I thought I should just bring that to your attention, because he did a nice job.
It's funny, he made it very exhaustive for our
Yes.
educational
None
purposes.
of the following are considered under brown, individual contacts or, yeah, okay, the attendance of any following conference, okay. Open publicized meeting to address
That's very
local
nice.
okay.
Can tell lawyers this.
Right, 'cause that's what you were, right? You did the same thing. Okay,
Yeah.
well, do you need a motion?
We need a motion.
Okay,
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nothing? Motion carries. Alright. Okay. Board policy 2710 deals with the conflict of interest. That is in the government code for our conflict of interest policy. I understand from Crystal that the conflict of interest policy is actually reviewed every single year. I
It's
remember
supposed to be correct.
right? Okay. So,
So that's reviewed, it doesn't mean we have to revise it every year, but we do have to review it every year and submit that we have reviewed it.
there are no revisions to it, right?
Jillian, you wanna?
Yeah, I can take this. So, you'll be considering, AP 2710 in a second, but, it's helpful to view them in context together. So Atkinson, our outside counsel, they reviewed our, board bylaw 2710, which used to contain all of the details that are now in AP 2710. They recommended that we separate it out
Right.
and have a board bylaw
Right.
that is overarching and pertaining to the board, and then move all of the details into the AP, because that pertains to staff and direct staff administratively. So this board bylaw is new in that it's a bylaw. The content is new.
Right.
There was an existing bylaw. That content is now in AP
Okay.
2710.
Right.
And so AP 2710 just goes into more detail about the actual requirements for the conflict of interest policy, and then it also lists out the positions that are required to file and things like that. So that's the context there.
And the bylaw 2710 is very well written. It's very concise and simple to the point. It's very clear. My only-
To
What's that?
Atkinson.
Yeah. My only comment is that at some point I'd like to see the board receive ethics training to also include conflict of interest so that they understand what the conflicts are.
Mhm.
And it's not just your simple,
Financial.
no, it's not your simple generic conflict. It's actually in the government code and it can get a little complicated. So it's great if we had some ethics training on that sometime in the future.
Okay.
Okay.
That can be part of our board development.
Yes.
Okay.
Any comments? No, nothing?
I think the Attorney General's office has an online ethics training, but it may not be relevant to this. I have to take a look at it.
There's a lot of free ethics training.
Yeah.
It might not be interesting.
Right.
Right. How big we can do this somewhere in the future. Okay, can we get, before,
So
do you have any questions? So moved?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None, motion carries. Okay. I think I saw this AP 2710, I've seen before, and I think Atkinson was revising it. They looked at it, and they were revising it to make sure that it's practical and relevant to our interested employees that would have to abide by this company.
And who are the interested employees?
It's at
There's a
the,
list.
scroll to the bottom.
List at the end.
All right.
The disclosure category, right here.
Second one.
Yeah.
They wrote this entire, I mean, they took some of it, but then
They updated, there's a lot of the footnotes are from Atkinson for clarification.
And the titles are accurate. They're not just generic titles. They match actual titles
Okay.
at PCC. So the disclosure categories are the number one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4.
Or 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
So do you need us to approve this AP, because this isn't an issue policy yet?
That's a good question.
No, it's attached to a board bylaw, so that the board does approve it.
Okay, all right. So moved.
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Motion carries. This next one is, this is in the education code, and the education code talks about communicable diseases and employees being required to provide medical certifications to make sure that they are free of communicable diseases upon hire, including tuberculosis. So this is a reflection of the ed code. And I guess I'm gonna ask Crystal, was this not in our board bylaw before and we're now updating it and we're adding it? The ed code's always been there.
Not exactly, but I'll explain. We had a board policy that dealt with communicable diseases and health exams. But the policy in the ed code has changed on health exams. Health exams do not have to be done by all employees. It's position specific. So if, for example, if we're hiring you for a position that has physical demands, we have to have a health examination. Communicable disease, on the other hand, all employees have to be free from communicable diseases, so we separated them out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you
Makes
already
sense.
approved the BP for physical exams, we
Right.
did that in January of 2024. This one just deals with communicable diseases.
Okay. And providing a medical certification. I just have one comment about this policy. This last paragraph, I understand that the superintendent will establish procedures to mitigate. I just want to make, and COVID is specifically called out in this policy or other pandemic exposures. I have concerns about one person passing a vaccine mandate, that if there is going to be a vaccine mandate, I would like the board to consider that. And decide on the issue. And the way this policy is written, the board has no input on something that is, has ramifications to a lot of people and subject to a lot of litigation. I just want to open that up for discussion for everyone.
So you would like the board to have input on whether or not the college will mandate vaccination?
Not input.
But you want us to decide? Make a
Approve.
decision, okay,
Yes.
okay.
yes. A lot of districts I know, the board approved, or didn't approve the vaccine mandate. It was not delegated.
Out of curiosity, Chair, do you know which districts you're referring to that have that?
Many districts, I know many community college districts where the board approved the vaccine mandate. I know many other government districts, other K through 12 districts where the board approved the vaccine mandate. It was not delegated.
I do know that during COVID, PUSD board approved or not approved the vaccine mandates. But since we're a community college board, I don't know which boards that were comparable but having been on the board during the time of COVID, I was surprised that the board didn't have the approval. It was delegated at that time to the superintendent, because all the other districts, the one that I knew from PUSD, the board made that decision.
Historically, Trustee Chenal, this power has been delegated to the superintendent during your time on the board. Sorry, got it.
Is this,
But it also, I'm sorry. I think that decision also caused a lot of upset. There was a lot, of course, during that time, hindsight is 2020. During that time, there was a lot of controversy around vaccination mandates, and there was a lot of public comments and I think different perspectives from faculty, staff, and also from students. So the board did not have the last say in what happened, and yet we are held accountable, to the public for that decision.
can I, this isn't really about vaccine mandates, is it? This is more about when a new employee gets hired and whether they have to, like when my child starts school, you have the big yellow thing with all your vaccinations on it.
That's very true, actually. This is a little bit out of place.
And then the second piece is just procedures to mitigate the risks. That would be, a vaccine mandate would be something that the government would impose. Like, it's interesting because there's only 3 health departments that are not county health departments in LA County. Pasadena is one of them. And she was the one who managed that, and then we as a entity in the city of Pasadena had to abide by both the county and the city and the state's vaccine mandate, right, saying that you had to have the vaccine. I think what we were required to do as an educational institution, and this is where all the variations came in, was how people had to prove it, right? And there were the hard and fast proof, and then the sort of more loosey-goosey ones, and then also the real controversies were when you had to come back, right? But you still had to wear a mask, you still, to come back, like if you were a student to come back, a public entity other than the campus would decide whether you had to be vaccinated, right? And then what we had to do is who comes back and when and all that stuff, I think.
Yes, I mean, I appreciate the context that you're putting that in, and certainly it's going down that memory lane of what transpired. I do think that at one point the county and the city had different recommendations, and so it was all during that time. But if this is not about a vaccine mandate, then I would just suggest we move on,
My recommendation is, both of you are correct. This education code relates to requiring newly hired employees to get a TB test and to show that they are free of communicable diseases. It doesn't have anything to do with risk management, and the things that this paragraph is referring to are really Cal OSHA issues. And when things come down, if there is some type of epidemic, you will be guided by agencies like CDC, LA County Department of Public Health, and Cal OSHA, and the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement. It will not be this policy that's giving us guidance. And then it's pursuant to those guidelines that each individual district can decide whether or not they want to pass a policy to mandate a vaccine. So I don't think it's related to this ed code, and I I think
Do you
it can be
take back what
removed.
you brought up?
I
Do you-
would.
Do you take back what you brought up?
Well, I left it in here
Okay.
for your discussion, but I actually don't,
Okay.
it's out of place, actually. It goes someplace else.
So, do you want a motion to?
Oh,
Just one more thing to throw in here, part of that mitigation for us is we have procedures where we have to get TB tested on every 4 or 5 years. So even as a regular employee of the college, you still get TB tested. So that's part of that idea of procedures to mitigate risk surrounding exposure to communicable diseases is that we continually get tested every 4 years or something.
you don't need this policy for the superintendent to mandate a requirement that all employees be TB tested. There's already a law that mandates it.
That's correct, but not everybody knows about that, which is why we have it in our board policies and administrative procedures for new employees to understand that we are required to do that.
So can I ask a question then? So if somebody's newly hired, do we ask them for COVID vaccination? Because if it's communicable diseases.
Not anymore.
Not
Okay,
anymore.
okay, alright.
But we did
We
at
did,
one point.
correct.
We're
Yeah.
beginning.
And I remember I had to get I had to go to St. George's,
We went together.
yeah, we went together.
Okay,
St.
It
So
was a
it's not-
crappy
I
year.
went to St. George, Utah.
so.
That's
That was,
So it's not, so not anymore, so it's, but not limited to COVID-19 or other, so then we don't need to, it's up to us, right? Whether we want them to be, whether they need to show vaccination proof for COVID-19? Okay.
I recommend that we actually remove that entire paragraph because it's not in the ed code and this other paragraph reflects that ed code.
I can see the argument for including it, it's just to, specify that there is this ability to continue mitigating the risk beyond just what is legally required. Just preserving that avenue, but not necessarily, many times this won't likely be used.
Why don't we put a period after diseases?
And leave out the last sentence, the rest of it?
And omitting
Yes,
the rest.
because
Yeah.
you're actually calling out a very specific,
You're actually, that's how I would do it.
that's
Yeah.
a great
Yay.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be
okay,
okay with that.
okay.
Alright.
Can you make a motion?
Yes, so I move that we approve this policy with the edit.
With a period.
with
After
the-
diseases.
After disease. So the policy should read in the last paragraph, furthermore, the superintendent president will establish procedures to mitigate the risks surrounding exposure to communicable diseases, period.
Second.
Alright, all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
all opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you. All right. Okay.
Information.
Do we have any information items? Okay. The meeting schedule, we'll send out a Zoom.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask Crystal for the, can you just, or send me the proposed list of your next set of policies that are up in your queue?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll send you that.
And then we can set a meeting schedule. I also like you to look at a draft policy on term limits for board of trustees for consideration.
And for discussion.
Oh, yeah, consideration and discussion regarding maximum terms.
Do you want us to draft something?
Yes, proposal of 12 years. Any other?
Can I ask a question? Do you, the city of Pasadena's term limit, measure is 12 years, then you can sit out, and then, so it's 12 consecutive years.
Well, why
On a
don't we
cap
have options for discussion?
Yeah, we could do an 8-year option, 12-year, consecutive years, however. I think the point is that we wanna have it for discussion, right, to, at least for us to review
Yes.
the topic.
Okay, anything else? Very good. Okay, so I think that's it. Okay,
Okay, wow.
we're adjourned.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Very good.
Did I?
I thought that with two
did I-
attorneys.